So, welcome everybody to the Tuesday Talk series, the no bullshit, no holds barred on everything real estate investing, where we bring expert speakers to talk about a specific topic, and then we can pick their brains on that particular topic. Guys, if you are following live on our Facebook group and you want your friends or family to be part of this, then send them the link to the Facebook group so they can actually add themselves and get all this great content for free. Okay, today we're going to be talking about tiny homes. If you have any questions before we start, also please drop them in the comment box so we can actually get those questions answered from these two experts, the two forward thinkers in Windsor, these two young guys here breaking ground, breaking barriers, doing things that a lot of us just watch on TV. Welcome, Clarke, Gallie, and Nate Schaly.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Awesome, awesome. Listen, guys, as I said in my little introduction there, you know, you guys are doing something that a lot of us only have dreams and ambitions to do. You know, the first one, I want to put it out there because a lot of people say that the first is doing a lot of things, which is, I'm going to call it right now, bullshit. But for you guys, you're really the first ones who are bringing tiny homes in Windsor. I got to congratulate you on that. You know, that's a big, big achievement. So before we get into the actual tiny house, can you give us a little brief on what you guys do? Do you work full time? You look like you're still in freaking high school to me, at least. But I'm sure you got other jobs, or is the tiny house taking care of all your time? Clarke, you want to start first?
Yeah. So you know, some of my friends know me as the guy building the tiny home. Other people know me as the investment realtor with the Wind City team. So I'm actually a full-time realtor and full-time tiny home developer. Those are basically my my two modes of what I do every day.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, Sav, thanks for having us on. My name's Nate Schaly. Clarke and I met probably 4 years ago, working together on property management. We had a small company in Windsor, and ever since then, it's kind of flourished and blossomed into what we're doing now with some small development on tiny homes. But my day job is in the automotive industry. I work in innovation, technology acquisition, I guess you could call it.
Okay, sweet. So you guys work full-time jobs in addition to doing this thing on the side, I guess, right?
Absolutely.
And then nice. And then is the ambition then is finally to do investing and reap the benefits of investing, be it tiny homes or anything else, and then get rid of those full-time jobs, or is this a one-time thing? You know, you do it for fun and that's it.
That's yeah, that's the $1 million question. I would love to be free of corporate America one day. That's definitely my ultimate goal. Hopefully my boss isn't watching, but that's Clarke's a lot closer than I am, being that he's got the freedom to be a real estate agent and do what he wants. But yeah, that's definitely my goal.
Yeah, no, to back on that, you know, Nate and I have, like you mentioned, you know, started working with businesses, started property management, looking at a bunch of other avenues. But it all really tied back to real estate. You know, I'm sure that's why, you know, Sav and everyone else on this call, real estate is the one thing that can actually provide you, or one of the true things provides you true financial freedom. So Nate and I, you know, worked on a lot of business ideas to kind of get around that. And ultimately, you know, construction was the one thing that we kept on falling back to. You know, it was the one thing that really intrigued us the most. It was the most complex thing I think about real estate. Because, you know, real estate buy and hold is one way to do stuff, but Nate and I like to, I guess, dive into the numbers, dive into how we can make it complex, kind of flip it around and do it our way. And that's how we kind of stumbled across towards this this niche bylaw in the Windsor bylaws. We kind of found it out, and I guess cracked the code to be the first ones. Hopefully doing we're planning on doing 5 this year, and then, you know, next year sky's the limit.
All right, awesome. Yeah, you jumped the gun here. I have a whole bunch of questions to ask you on that, but you know, absolutely. I'm so happy that you said, you know, what you said, because that's really why most of us are in real estate investing, right? In the first place, to get rid of that, to get out of that rat race and get out of corporate, you know, being puppets for the corporate world, right? And get that financial freedom, time freedom. Really, that's the most important thing. So, what's the beauty about bringing you guys out here is that you're doing it in a different way, right? The most, I talk about the burst strategy. I talk about adding legal second suites, but you found another way to do exactly what I'm doing with the same goal in mind. So that's the beauty about real estate investing. I think for anybody who's listening to this call, is that there's so many avenues that you can really explore, to get you to your goal. You don't have to be sticking on one single thing, or not in one, but a lot of things, right? I mean, if you get bored of something, you can jump to something else, but it's all under the same umbrella. It'll get you your goal, and I love that about you guys. So again, kudos to that, right? Let's get into it. The tiny house. So, I guess the first question really is what inspired you to do tiny homes? I mean, were you guys just sitting around having a beer, watching HGTV, or you saw something? Like, what's the one thing that clicked in your minds and said, okay, you know what, that's what we're gonna do? If there was.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've gotten asked this question quite a lot. From HGTV to looking at stuff on Pinterest and seeing all the the minimalistic living that's going on. So if you actually look at other tiny homes from those TV shows, they typically range from maybe 400 to 500 square feet. Our first tiny home is actually 600 square feet. So it's a little bigger than the average tiny home from those shows. Some New York apartments, Toronto condos, they maybe around 600 square feet or even less. So we kind of branded it as the tiny home, but realistically, it's the detached accessory dwelling in-law suite. Not that much of a sexy name, so that's why we went with tiny homes. So we kind of went with this strategy because, us being property managers, we dealt with a lot of landlords, a lot of investors, kind of our own portfolio. Maintenance and capital expenditures is the things that skyrocket that no one really accounts for. They put the, percentage every single month that'll go in there, but it jumps, over the years, it jumps a lot higher than you think. So, we kind of looked at it from a point of view of how can we get into new development and new construction at a affordable rate and still reap the rewards of these new developers that, build large multifamilies, that build subdivisions. We want to reap the same rewards as them. But obviously, we don't have the same budget as them, so we had to get creative and look at other options with our own real estate, looking at options on the market, and this ultimately led us to build this tiny home.
And to back up what Clarke said earlier, we have tried a lot of things. We've tried just about every business idea you can think of over the last 5 years. From property management to tech ideas, and as he said, we always end up back at real estate in some form or fashion.
Okay, so you guys are entrepreneurs at heart. I mean, that's important to know, because when you get into new projects like this and things that you never done before, there's a high risk of failing, right? And normally, like, for most people, you don't want to have that tag that you failed in something, right? Or it's not a good feeling. But the true successful people are the ones who just push up, get up again, and move on again, and do something else until they hit that jackpot, right? So I love the fact that you guys have tried a lot of things and you've always come back to real estate. That's great. But now you're trying something that within the real estate that you believe is gonna be successful. Again, awesome. When you guys decided that you actually want to do the tiny home, and by the way, 600 square foot is not big. It's not. It may not be tiny, but it's not big. You got to fit a kitchen, a bathroom, a bedroom in there, and there's a lot going on in there, right? 2 bedrooms. There you go. In there. So it's not tiny. I mean, it's not big. For me, it's tiny, right? And I guess we'll get into this, but if you can go 600, why can't you go 400 or maybe even 300? I think it's the same. I think it would be the same process, right? But before that, when you decided that you guys want to do a tiny house, walk us through the process of, okay, now how do I find this thing? Where do I find this thing? Where do I find the perfect property or the land or the location where I'm going to hit all these check marks so I can get this project up and running successfully?
Yeah, so I'll start on that, and I'm sure Nate will fill in some stuff that I miss. So start off with the tiny home. Obviously, you need the land. So for us, we looked at our own properties, and there was one that kind of fit the mold, but for our first project, we wanted it to be perfect. We wanted something where we saw the land, we could divide it easily. We can offer both tenants that are going to be on the property, kind of their own property, because that's the cool thing about tiny homes in your own backyard as well. It's not exactly like a duplex where it's side by side. It's your own lot, your own parking, your own like patio, your own backyard. It's we can provide a lot on this land. So we went out there and we found this one home, kind of in closer to downtown Windsor, where it was 182 feet deep. So we looked at that and thought, okay, there's a lot of unused land in the back here. Let's see if the bylaws fit with this property. So we basically, went over Windsor bylaws, specifically in the tiny home sector, and started playing around with the setbacks, started playing around with the lot coverage. They recently updated it actually this month. It used to be that a secondary in-law suite can only be 40% total square foot of the secondary in-law suite of the actual primary property. So we had to, account for that as well. So we kind of built our own calculator of, okay, you have this lot, if you have this land, given the setbacks and given the square foot of the existing home, what can we build? And we essentially worked backwards from there. And then we applied our own financial models on there and made sure, it hit the metrics as real estate investors that we're looking for. And once, both those boxes turned out green, we just decided to pull the trigger.
Nate, do you want to add anything on that before I dig deeper?
No, I think Clarke hit all the major points. I mean, we looked at a lot of different properties, and we learned a lot about what works and what's going to save us money down the long run, which we can get into at another time, because there's an unbelievable amount we learned in terms of property selection, and I think that's one of the big things Clarke took away from this, him being a realtor, and helping other people find now properties to build tiny homes on. It's allowed us to be able to really hone in on what works. And what we're looking for in terms of building a tiny home may not necessarily be what another investor finds as value. So it's allowed us to find decent deals on single family homes that other people would just say, it's got a slightly oversized lot, like it really doesn't provide any benefit. Well, to us, it provides endless benefit. So that was a huge takeaway for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I love it. Perfect. Tell me something. So when you found this particular piece of property, having gone through all these other potentials, did you do the work before you even put on an offer? So did you go to the bylaws? Did you go to the city, check and see if it met all those criteria before putting in the offer, or you had to make an offer first before you can get permission from the seller, if you will, to get all this information?
No, we definitely called the building department more times than I care to think about. Connor in zoning there probably despises us for the number of times we called him and asked him about stuff, and going in there to meet him. But he was the city has been a huge help. They've walked us through every process, and really held our hand for this first one. And Connor and Enrique and George, I mean, they were always willing to meet with us and go through any questions we had. Being that this was the first one, they of course wanted to see it go through as well. So they were super helpful. Yeah, and gosh, I can't imagine how many times we called Connor and asked him to consult on something.
Actually, on top of that, there was, it was interesting because, when the article came out, we didn't actually realize we were the first ones until the article came out. And then we kind of texted each other, like, oh, hey, I guess we are the first ones. That's cool. But yeah, there was a couple other people that were going through the process. But, again, coming back to site selection, we wanted something where we didn't have to have a single variance, because to us, a variance meant another maybe month and a half of going through the same process, appealing for it and doing all that. Nate and I wanted to make our job easy. We wanted to make the city's job easy. And we were willing to wait out for that one site that we just passed on to the city. They checked all the boxes, passed on to us, and we got our permit. Obviously, there's a little more to that, but we wanted to make sure that, the process was as simplified as possible.
Yeah. No, well, we already started in this topic, so I'm gonna jump right into it when it comes to the city. But before that, you talked about Connor and Enrique and all these guys in the city. Side note, I just made a mental note. I'm not gonna mention your guys' names every time I go and talk to Connor about my legal second suite additions, because he's gonna probably throw me out from there. But it's absolutely true what you said about the city of Windsor promoting this sort of stuff, right? I remember standing at the excuse me, the Heritage and Standing Committee, where they talked about the ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and they had 0 success rates, because most people gave up right from the start when they found out, listen, in order to do this for the existing property, be it add accessory dwelling unit on top of a garage or add a coach house in their laneway or something like that, the cost involved was too much, and the city bylaws didn't really promote that, right? And that's something they took seriously, and that's something that they changed for the better. Yeah, I can compare it to legal second suites as well. We are lucky, I would say, we are blessed in the city of Windsor, where we have city officials who are promoting this sort of stuff. I know other municipalities around the GTA that have stopped this, and they make it really, really hard, for investors to actually do this sort of stuff. I was talking to a couple of inspectors this morning, in fact, at one of my projects, and they were like, listen, call our boss, tell him to come up on Win City Investors Club and talk about it, because we are trying to promote this, so much more, right? So for all you guys, all you landlords out there listening to this, if you're not doing things legally, if you have illegal secondary suites or mother-in-law suites or accessory dwelling units, or for whatever reasons, boarding houses and illegal student rentals, I'm sorry, but you're stupid, because really you have no excuses. You have no excuses in the city of Windsor. Do it right from the start, and you'll get the benefits of that, right? For the property value and the ad that you're adding to the property value, the city of Windsor, who's promoting that stuff, and I can guarantee you they're on the lookout, right? So they're going to come and check to make sure that you meet code and safety and so on and so forth. So definitely no excuses on that. Going back to the tiny house and the city of Windsor, walk us through the process. So, you said that basically you were calling them a lot before you actually put in offers. Do you guys know the bylaws? Did you have to study that, or was your architect involved in the bylaws? Were they helping a lot? Can you give a novice investor, what are the top learnings, takeaways from that process?
Yeah, we read the bylaw 8600 document more times than I can care to think about. And the city of Windsor also has a nice little summary about secondary residential suites. And Clarke mentioned a little earlier on that they've recently put forward some changes to make it even easier for people to build these units. So if you go to the summary on the City of Windsor website and scroll right to the bottom, there's a link there that outlines all of the new changes that are, I think they've passed the first step and they just got to go to full council to be passed. It's been held up due to coronavirus, obviously, but they're making it even easier. But through all that, there are still guidelines you have to meet. You have to meet Ontario Building Code. One of the things I wanted to stress is that with all these things you see on TV, the tiny homes, most of those show up on trailers. And then they build them off site, they drive them to the lot, they park them there, maybe hook up services. And then you have your tiny home. In Windsor, well, in Ontario, that is not allowed. You cannot have a trailer hooked up into public services, so water and sanitary. Once you hook up into City of Windsor water, that building needs to be to Ontario Building Code, which means you need a foundation. So we call it a tiny home. It's really just it's a small house. Because it has a full foundation. It has everything that a regular home would. So that drives the permitting process. So again, the City of Windsor, they have pushed through those changes, and part of that is to align the current bylaws with new residential construction. So setbacks and everything that you would see as if you were building a brand new home on a new lot now actually are the same for tiny homes. So they want to make that process more streamlined. So when we went through it, it actually could have been a little bit of a more simple process. There were some things we could have avoided, but when we sat down with Enrique and George and Connor, they said, look, you guys should just do it the right way the first time, because this is how it's going to be going forward. And that's what we did. And we're very thankful we did that. So getting into that permitting process, as I mentioned, it follows the path as if you were to build a new home. So what we did was, we'll start off, okay, we purchased the site. We had spoken to the city. They gave us somewhat of a thumbs up saying, okay, yeah, you're good. And then we started talking to our architect. So we hired Dory Azar Architects. So Dory, he's based out of Tecumseh. He's a fantastic architect. We landed on him because he actually was posting about tiny homes on Facebook, just because he is truly passionate about them. So we reached out to him, ended up hiring him and working with him, and it was one of the best decisions we've ever made. He came up with a beautiful design. I mean, we had nothing to do with that. That was all Dory. But from there, once we had the drawings, we basically got his drawing set, a survey, and a grade plan. And we submitted that package to the city. Now, one thing to note here, oh, and we also had to do an HVAC design summary, which is also pretty standard. It's just to show that you've done your calculations for your mechanical systems. So one of the things to note here is if you're not using a licensed architect, the process is a lot more cumbersome. So there are a plethora of forms we would have had to fill out if Dory wasn't licensed. So basically, when we get his drawings, it's stamped with his license number. He says, yes, I'm a certified architect in Ontario. And the result of that is we didn't have to fill out anything. We just submitted our drawings and that was it. And then Enrique had us come in for a meeting. So we sat down again with George, Connor, and Enrique. We went through everything, made sure it was complete, and we did the official submission. And then coronavirus hit, unfortunately. I think we submitted like 3 or 4 days before things shut down, which was really unfortunate. But we ended up getting our permits beginning of April, and we weren't allowed to start construction until basically 2 weeks ago. And that's
awesome. Just on the architect over here. So Dory, is he a BCIN or does he have the engineering qualification as well?
BCIN, I believe. I don't think he's a licensed engineer as well.
Okay, so that's amazing. So that's pretty straightforward. It's like doing a legal second suite as well, where you need a BCIN designer. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think your power team is the most important thing that you need for a successful project, right? So architects are super important because they know the code, number one. So maybe you don't need to know the code, the back of your head. And they have the contacts with the city, right? So, I remember talking to the city about my architect and they had her on file. So they knew, okay, Ashley is going to be giving the design. We're pretty okay with that, right? Versus Joe Blow from down the street that they've never heard of. They like to work with people that they know, right? So that's awesome. Great. You mentioned timelines, Nate. So from the time, discounting COVID and the stall that we had, during that time, you applied for the permits in April, you said, and you got it, you got the permits in April. And you can start construction.
Yep.
Okay.
So overall timeline, we closed February 20th. We applied for the permits approximately 2 weeks later. We would have had the permits probably 3 weeks after that. So you could say, 2 weeks, 3. You could say probably within 4 to 5 weeks from closing on site and start construction.
That's pretty damn good. That's a great timeline for a new build, and something new in Windsor, ADU that we've never done before for the city to approve those permits, in 4 or 5 weeks. That's pretty impressive. I can't, deny that. So what was the holdup from 8?
Yeah, so sorry, I should just say that with a little asterisk, because if the city gets busy, obviously those timelines get pushed. And if your permit package isn't complete and it gets stuck somewhere, obviously your timeline is going to drag on further. So that's assuming if you can do everything perfectly, 5 weeks probably.
Of course. What was the holdup from April to June? Is this because of COVID where you couldn't get into the home or start construction and stuff like that? Okay, got it. Okay. So now you're 2 weeks in. I've put up some pictures over here. If you want to walk through them, that'll be great. Where are we? I guess this was the start. There was nothing on this piece of land here. I was taking a second to load up, but guys, for those of you who are watching live online, if you got any questions for Clarke and Nate here, drop it in the comment box. If you haven't addressed something that you want to ask, please do so. We can get these guys, answering these questions. So this, I guess, is the backyard, if you will, of the house that's existing, and then you have this deep lot. So that's where you decided to do this, right?
Yep. So you can see there's also an alley in the back. That's also what drew us to this. It's really going to be like 2 completely separate homes. And that was a big win for us.
Yeah, for sure. So tell me about the home, the existing home. Is that something is that rented right now or is it vacant? What's going on there?
It is rented. So it was renovated before we bought it. Basement had been waterproofed and some cosmetic renovations. There's a few things we had to fix up. We replaced soffits, gutters. We did furnace AC. But yeah, there's a family in there. They're absolutely fantastic. They put up with all our crap, being there all the time and making noise. So yeah, we greatly appreciate them. But yeah, there is a family in there.
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, I was going to ask the next question, if it was rented, how are they feeling about all this construction that is going on in their backyard there?
Yeah, so we basically, for them putting up with our crap, when we sever the backyard in half, or not sever it, but divide it in half with a fence, we're going to do a full fence so that their kids and dogs have a place that they can play closed in. We're going to do nice landscaping, all fresh sod, because when they moved in, it was basically clay and it was unusable. So middle of this summer, it's going to be like a completely new space for them.
Got it. That's amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. Great idea. So are you actually going to the edge to the second house or the tiny house? Is it going to be from the alley now, or is it actually going to be from the front street where there's a split driveway or something that they can get back to the back there?
No, the tiny house is actually going to have its own driveway off the alley. So the renters for the tiny house will have, it'll basically be like its own separate entrance. They'll have a driveway right in front where they can park 2 cars. They won't even know that the other house is there, other than if they peek over the fence.
What's the city bylaws on that? Do you have to sever the land for that, or you can just have two driveways, one on each end of the lot there?
Exactly, just 2 driveways. So depending on where the lot is within the city of Windsor, there are additional parking requirements. Because we're part of the downtown core, we did not need an additional parking space. But the fact that we had all the space, it would go wasted. So we added a parking space. But there's some documentation on the city of Windsor to determine whether you need to add one or not.
Amazing. Wow. So really, guys, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about it, I would think, don't even, before you even go, for those of you who already have properties and who are already invested in Windsor, before you can even think about looking for properties which might be suitable for a tiny house, go back to what you have. Maybe you have a deep lot. Maybe you have an alley at the back there that you can do exactly what these guys did, right? Maybe you can call Clarke and Nate and have them come out to your place and check it out. If you have an inkling that it could be possible that you could build a tiny house or an accessory dwelling unit. I know I've talked to a few of you guys about that specifically. So, we have experts over here. They're part of our group. Reach out to them. Guys, before you go, I should say, don't forget to drop your contact information in the comments group there, in our Facebook group, so people can get in touch with you. So here's the foundation, obviously, that you have dug up and then laid there. Mm-hmm. How hard was it to find contractors, guys?
It was a little bit difficult. So the foundation was probably the toughest. We ended up going with JD Excavating. Well, I guess we could say they ended up going with us. We really wanted to work with them. We heard they were the best in Windsor. And based on what we went through digging the foundation, that's been confirmed. Adam over at JD has been fantastic to deal with. Those guys really know what they're doing. So one of the issues when we started digging the foundation is that we couldn't hit stable clay to pour the footing. So we ended up having to go 3 feet deeper than we had anticipated. And if you don't know what you're doing when you're pouring a foundation or digging for footings, that can get very, very expensive. If you have to start bringing engineers out to do any geotechnical testing or soil samples, that can get really expensive. But the guys at JD knew enough to be able to say, okay, we can go down this much further. We can backfill with gravel. We can still meet the minimum or the maximum crawl space heights. I mean, they were excellent to work with.
Amazing. Nice. Was it, we'll come to the rest of the construction, but was it hard during COVID to actually find contractors, get them out there to the project, explain to them what you're doing there? I doubt there's going to be a lot of experienced people. Well, a foundation is a foundation, but, to do this size home and the specific requirements that you might have, was it easy to find during the COVID time, or was it harder than you would have liked?
I would say it was easier just because a lot of the contractors were sitting at home waiting for the same thing. So we were able to get all of the sub trades quoted pretty easily. And then someone reached out to us, and we haven't announced an official partnership yet, but hopefully we can do that here soon. But a local builder reached out to us who's actually working on ramping up what we would call factory construction. I don't want to call it prefab because prefab sometimes has a bad connotation attached to it. But what this builder is doing is essentially taking the above ground work that you would do on site and putting it in a factory. And there are endless benefits to that. We've seen a lot of construction start to go that way. You know, a lot of the big home builders in the US were already doing this prior to 2007, before the huge economy crash, which kind of reset things. But if you talk to a lot of the builders today, they're going to say that is the way of the future, and that's the best way to control quality, cost, and efficiency. So now as we're pouring and building the foundation, we can have our above ground builder building all the panels in his factory. So the day the foundation is done, the panels can show up on the back of a truck with a crane and be placed on site. And in 4 days, we now have our building envelope complete. So the path that we're taking, and this first one is going to be a learning experience for both us and our manufacturing partner. But we're going to take this model and we're going to replicate it again and again and again. And we're hoping to really scale this next year, not just for us, but for also clients as well. Because if we can get 3 base designs and have those basically queued up, or have a manufacturing process in a plant ready to go, in a matter of a couple weeks, our manufacturing partner can build an entire house. It's a pretty fantastic process, and the fact that these are so small, they fit nicely on a truck in a few pieces, so you don't have to pay for oversized loads. So yeah, this next part, I would urge everyone to follow our Facebook and Instagram, because once we start getting the building envelope in place, it's going to be very, very interesting to see, because it's going to come in probably 4 or 6 pieces, and it's going to be craned into place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, listen, man, I love this. I had a light bulb go off. I want to talk to your manufacturer, because prefab, what we call prefab, which had a bad rep back in the day, is exactly as you say, is the next big thing that's happening for all new builds, right? I know a couple of buddies of mine did it out in Burlington, Hamilton area, just in fact before COVID hit, beginning of this year. It cut their building time from 6 months to about 6 weeks, because this thing was happening simultaneously, as you said, in a factory somewhere. And by the time they laid the foundation, they had services run to the actual site. They would just come and put this thing together. Once it was done, looking at it myself, I can't tell you if it was built from scratch or if it was, prefabbed and put in place, right? So definitely, I want to talk to your manufacturer. I would love to have him on the show. I would love to see the progress of your guys, videos or some stuff like that we can bring you back and we can actually look at that. That's amazing technology. And I think for anybody who's thinking about building homes, David Tran, I'm looking at you. You're doing that. I don't know if you do prefab, but maybe that's something that you want to do. I'll look at. I'll follow up. Okay, cool. So here's the foundation. What else you got over here? Let me look through these pictures. What's going on over here?
So this one,
they look like bamboo bundles.
Yeah, so those are the concrete forms. So basically, they set those on top of the footing that you see there. They bolt them together, and it essentially makes the form for the foundation. And then they pour the concrete in there. They let it dry and cure, and they take those forms off and bring them back out. So all the work actually you're seeing on our Instagram page, it actually is really only like 4 or 5 days worth of work. Every time I go to the site, I mean, it's crazy how much farther these guys have gotten.
Wow, amazing. Yeah. Okay, so this is after they've actually poured the foundation. They've taken the forms out. Okay, and I guess, oh, here it is. So that's what it looks like. Okay. These walls are not prefab, right? These are poured. At site.
Yeah, those are all poured. So you can see the different panels. That's one width of the concrete form. Yeah. And then because they have the rods through holding the forms in place, it creates a hole. So then they put tar over all the holes, obviously, because you want it water sealed. And then they're going to come back, wrap it in basically a waterproof barrier, waterproof membrane, which it kind of looks like a Schluter floor layment. So it basically just keeps water off the foundation. And then it'll drain into the gravel footing there. And then from there, they're going to backfill, and the backfill will be done Thursday. So it should be all graded by Saturday afternoon, ready for building envelope.
Sweet. Yeah, I'll definitely be following what you guys are doing over here. How high is this thing? Is it a single story? Is it 1 story, 1.5? What's going on there?
It's I guess you could consider it a ranch almost. So it's all one floor. It's all ground floor. So what Clarke mentioned earlier was the 40% GFA rule, which is now no longer a thing. So going into this build, we knew that they were removing that rule. So that basically said, if your primary home is 1,000 square feet, your ADU can only be 40% of that, so 400 square feet. And that isn't a good example because the minimum has to be 450 in Windsor, but you get the idea. So we were limited by how big our primary residence was. And that basically landed us on this 598 square foot design. I think 600 was the max. So with that, we can only really do a one floor, but our next two builds, which we actually, Clarke wrote the APS yesterday for the land.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah, so that should be closing hopefully in the next few weeks. They're twin buildings essentially. So they're gonna be mirror image buildings, but they're gonna be raised ranches. So it's going to be our design 2 for our portfolio. So it'll actually have a footprint that's half the size of what you see here, because it's going to be a story and a half tall.
Nice, amazing. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. I'm just going through the questions over here and comments, in the live Facebook group. John Gould says you guys should make a tiny home subdivision, like a trailer park. Nah, but a fancy trailer park without the trailers. Yeah, for sure. Mark says Clarke and Nate are phenomenal. Thanks for the insight. Thanks for joining, Marco. That's what we're trying to do over here. I have a deep lot in Sandwich. Ha ha ha, says John. Okay, maybe you want to contact Clarke and Nate and see if that's something that he could do. I guess you guys, he also says, I guess you guys could buy land from existing investors too without owning the home. Good point, John. Maybe somebody has a deep lot that they can't sever and sell it to, these guys, or, I don't know, joint venture with these guys and take it from there. Which brings me to my next question, or my next discussion point. I think you touched a little bit on it, Nate. What's your plan with this? What do you want to do with this? Are you, is it just 1, 2, 3? You said you want to scale up. Is this something they're doing individually, or are you trying to get partners in there? Give us some insight on your future.
Yeah, for sure. So Clarke, I'll take a stab at it. Feel free to chime in. But we have 2 paths going. We have the homes that Clarke and I are building for ourselves. So we have our own portfolios that we're 50-50 on. And we're trying to build that, obviously, to Clarke's point about financial freedom. And we have path number 2, which is where we're trying to sell these to other people. We weren't trying to develop path 2 until next year after we got 5 of these built, but the article got written and we've had just an uncanny amount of interest in these. So we're ramping that up sooner. And that kind of ties into our manufacturing partner, so we can help scale that a little quicker. So we're already starting to do quotes and starting to talk to people about building these for them, just because we have that manufacturing partner. We're confident in his abilities to be able to scale this up. So we'll handle like foundation, electrical, plumbing, and he'll come in and do the above grade building envelope. But yeah, I think that answers your questions. It's basically that 2 path. It's selling them and developing our own portfolio. And we're just going to try and, find enough time in the day to do both.
Yeah, and I guess a little on top of that as well. We have so like Nate said, since the article, we've had quite the interest of people coming out. I think we've quoted, I don't know, like 20 to 30 lots to see if a tiny home could actually fit on that lot. But during that reach out as well, we've had quite a few investors reaching out and saying like, hey, this piece of land is pretty interesting. What do you guys want to do here? So from a private money kind of JV point of view, we've had some interest in that, and we're willing to entertain that as well. So that's a third avenue that we're interested in exploring in the future. But yeah, the first 2 right now is definitely kind of building on our own portfolio, building for others, and then potential JV partnerships in the next year.
Awesome. While you were talking, I was trying to find the live Facebook event so I can look at the questions. For some reason, I can't. I'm having some technical difficulties there. But yeah, so 2 paths. No, awesome. I like the fact that you're doing, you're building your own portfolio where it's your stuff and you want the creme de la creme, of course. But at the same time, you're helping other investors who might want to do this turnkey, right? And JV with them. On that note, I don't know if you can, but I'm going to ask you anyways. Can you share some numbers? Like how much would something like this cost to actually build? What do you expect in rents? What are you trying to do at the end of the day? Are you trying to Airbnb it like short-term rentals, or is it, you want long-term tenants? Give us some insight on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Clarke, I guess take another stab at this. So we tried to prepare some numbers ahead of time on what this could look like. So just keep in mind, you know, every cost model is different. Every situation is different. So when we looked at this, we assumed that you are an investor, you own a property already, and you have an additional piece of land that you want to build an ADU on. So that's how we ran this cost model. So keep that in mind. And if anyone has any questions about how we came up with these numbers, we'd be happy to talk afterwards and share that. So basically what we came up with was a build price of around $200,000 for what you're seeing at assumption. And that's the, you know, the fully fringe build price that includes everything basically. Now there are some site specific variables that we're going to run into. So for example, at assumption, our plumbing run is 75 feet uphill. That adds cost. Sanitary lines are fed by gravity. So, you know, stuff like that. We had to remove 6 big trees. There's a whole bunch of varying costs that can go into this. So what we're working on doing with our manufacturer is basically come up with a build cost for just the building and then quote site specific variables. So if we use an all-in price of $200,000, and that should get you your building, your landscaping, a driveway if you need it, you know, a fence, all that good stuff. And getting money from a bank for this is relatively simple as well. Because you're building an ADU on an existing address, you can finance this as a renovation. Because technically the ADU doesn't have a separate address or like, you know, it's not an iterative number. It's like, you know, A and B. So you can go to the bank, prove that it's going to be 200 grand and get a loan with 20% down. So assuming a down payment of 50%, we're estimating rents for this 2-bedroom unit to be $1,350. That's obviously going to vary. You know, some people have told us you're crazy, you're never going to get that. And other people have told us you're crazy, it should be 1,600. So averaging out all, and based on our own portfolio, because we have 9 other units in Windsor that we rent out. So looking at what market rents are for those areas, et cetera, we came up with $1,350. And now keep in mind that's plus. So this house has a separate water meter, separate hydro meter, separate gas meter. So tenants pay all their own utilities. So if you're building this on an existing lot that already has a home, your incremental costs are really, really small. So for example, at assumption, our real estate taxes, our property taxes are frozen for 5 years. We do not have to pay a penny more for increased value, which is fantastic. And that was through the city of Windsor. So depending on where you are in Windsor, you're also eligible for those grants. So basically your only incremental cost is insurance and your management fee if you're going to hire someone to manage it. Because the building is brand new, and as Clarke mentioned, this was one of our biggest pain points with our own properties, was maintenance and repairs. And then on top of that, CapEx. So the building that exists on assumption, we just spent $7 grand on a furnace and AC.
Yep.
I mean, that stuff costs a lot of money. And when you're talking about, you know, a few $100s a month cash flow on a single family, that eats into years of cash flow. So basically you don't have to accrue for any CapEx for almost 5 years. And depending on the mechanical systems you have, you know, you could probably start accruing in year 4, but you might be able to push that out to year 6. And then for maintenance and repairs, it's really minimal. Everything is brand new. For the first 1 to 2 years, everything in the house is going to have a full warranty on it. Because we're partnering with the manufacturer that we are, and this is something we're working on in the background as well, is having these units be Tarion certified. And Tarion is the governing body for, you know, residential home builds in Ontario. And if you're building a new home for someone, it has to come with a Tarion warranty. And that includes 7 years of coverage on varying things. So to us, that's a huge value add. So with the reduced maintenance, the little to no CapEx for 5 years, assuming no incremental property taxes, we have incremental insurance. So we assume an extra $600 a year in insurance. And then we assume $50 per unit plus tax, HST to manage it, because that's what we pay today. So you're looking at $200,000 all in, $40,000 down payment, and you have a cash on cash return of 17.4%. And then depending on where you are, the resale is, you know, it can be up and down, but you're looking at an ROI of, you know, mid 50% potentially, which is pretty darn good.
Yeah. Not too shabby whatsoever. Do you have any idea? Have you ever already started talking to the banks when it comes to the refi? Like, if they have to appraise this thing, obviously there's no comps because now you have basically two houses on one piece of land. You know, you created a second house. How do they appraise that thing? Do they appraise them separately, or obviously it's together because it's not it's under one parcel there? But have you started that discussion with the banks or no?
Clarke, I'll let you take that one, being that you're the expert comp finder and real estate agent.
Yeah, so like Savio mentioned, comps very rarely do they exist in this kind of way for a fashion for these type of properties. So you can look at in-law suite properties as a comps, but then again, this is a detached, fully separate building. So we're still working, with the bank to figure out how they're going to appraise it. The current way we're looking at this one for appraisal status is we're basically showing the plans, kind of showing, the existing property, what they bought it for, showing the plans, the potential of the plans, and kind of valuing the two separately, and then bring them together to kind of find, the after, I guess, ARV value of what this is going to be. So the way that, we're going about financing this way is a little interesting. We're doing like financing beforehand and then using that money to fund the build, as opposed to, providing the money up front and then refining after the ARV. We're kind of doing like a predetermined ARV value with the bank based off the build, and then working our way backwards. We're hoping in the future, we can kind of figure out a more, easier system with the bank. But we're kind of valuing it as a kind of a luxury duplex. Is the way we're kind of looking at this moving forward.
Nice, sweet, man. That's interesting. Interesting that the bank's actually doing that because, as you know, I do legal second suites and in South Windsor, where there's none ever been done before, and it's hard to get a comp. It's hard, and what we've come up to, I'm in the process right now. And one of the things that I'm trying to convince the appraiser is that, listen, let's take an income method, right? So I got 2 units. That's the total income I'm getting. Go find another duplex, a legal duplex. I don't care where it is, that's producing that kind of income, and then we can talk, right? So that's the way we'll look at it. But the fact that you can go to the bank, I guess because it's new construction and it's an ADU, the bank says, okay, it's it's a little bit different, that they can set an ARV before you even start the construction. But that's awesome. Cool. Let's we're running out of time here. I mean, there's so much more we can talk about. I can talk about this all night, man. It's so much fun, so interesting. But let's get back to the Facebook live chat. Let me see if there's any other comments or questions. Sammy Said says, what about a tiny home duplex side by side? I love it. That's taking both of our expertise here, guys. What do you think about that?
Yeah, we've definitely thought about it. Right now, we're really just trying to build showpieces right now to show like what are the far limits that you can do. It's a lot of it is like marketing, a little selfish marketing for NC Capital. So we're going to build a little bit more, tiny, grandiose homes, if you will. But yes, absolutely, you could do a tiny home duplex.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think it's coming. I'm not gonna lie. I think it's coming to Windsor. The fact that we have a housing shortage, I should say, a housing crisis, right? Where you had a lot of people, a lot of out-of-towners, a lot of Torontonians, a lot of retirees coming to Windsor area and the surrounding Windsor Essex area for these big land, big plots, right? Big homes that they couldn't have anymore in the GTA area or wherever they're coming from. I think that's going to happen in Windsor eventually, right? I mean, these guys are breaking barriers right now with the tiny house. Don't think for a second that this is going to be the last of it. I think that we're going to get smaller and smaller and smaller in our living space, because that's the only way we can go. We can't go this way. We have to go this way, right? So that's definitely something that's coming, and I wouldn't be surprised if Clarke and Nate are on the forefront of that. Okay, what else do we have here? David says, I tried the trailer thing, but I got denied. Okay. I knew David would be part of this because this is something that he does. Okay, existing plumbing or new service through public works, he asks. I guess this is for obviously the tiny house services.
Existing. So we're just tying into the house that already has existing plumbing. So the water line comes in through the basement at the back of the house. So we're just going to tie into that water line before the meter so that we can add a separate meter in the tiny home. And for sanitary, same thing. The sanitary comes out at the back of the house. It was already replaced by the previous owner. So they did waterproofing and all plastic sanitary lines. So we've already dug it out, trenched it, and our plumber is actually going to tie into it on Thursday, and away you go.
Nice. So these are all just before the meter, so they, from utilities, it's still separated, but it's just one line basically, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. I hope that answers your question, David. If you want to ask something else, then please do so. Nick says, I have a place on Howard and Erie. It has a lane access in the back. Would that work for access and or parking via laneway?
Yes, very likely.
You guys get that?
Clarke, is that part of the no additional parking zone required? I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'd have to pull up the downtown, or I guess like the Windsor map. But in terms of going off a alleyway, Nate and I basically doing the same thing at Assumption. We saw the alleyway and saw we could squeeze in a parking lot behind there, and it was a great opportunity to have a separate parking lot there for the tenants. You're going through the trouble building a separate house, providing separate parking and separate fencing for that home goes the distance. It turns into renting a single family home as opposed to an apartment. You kind of built in somewhere. As opposed to the additional parking requirement, you'd have to refer to the City of Windsor zoning map. I don't know it off the top of my head, Howard and Erie.
Maybe Mike, if you want to get in touch with these guys, or you can go to the city yourself and ask them if that's possible. Then you'll get your answer to that. But definitely, we've talked about this before. I think it's an opportunity for you. So again, I can't reiterate, guys. You're doing an amazing job. Thank you for bringing this to Windsor. Thank you for coming on to the Wind City Investors Club and sharing openly what you guys are doing and where you're going with this. So other investors who follow us and maybe new or maybe experienced want to do the same, they know who to get in touch with. So thank you so much for coming out there, and we want to follow up with you guys. So we'll bring you back, in a couple of months and see. I don't know, in a couple of months, maybe too late. The house will be up, and you'll have tenants in there. That's how fast you guys are moving. So we'll bring you back in maybe a month or so, just to see where you are. Okay. So thanks again. For everybody else who's listening, we're running out of time. We got 2 minutes left. So thank you again for coming on live to our Tuesday talk series, where we bring real estate experts, real estate experts out here, and pick their brains on what they're doing and what makes them successful. Next week, we have, in my opinion, the biggest wholesaler in the whole of Ontario, Luke Boyden. So, we're going to get the inside scoop from Luke on what makes him so successful. If you haven't signed up to his deals, I really would advise you to do so. He's everywhere in Ontario. He got a new deal coming out every 2 days. So I don't know how he does it. We're going to find out. So if you haven't signed up already, sign up to the group, the private Facebook group, so we can meet up here next Tuesday and we can pick Luke's brain. On that note, stay safe and stay humble and stay successful. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks. Appreciate it.